Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another EUCI LinkedIn Live. This time we're streaming on LinkedIn and X as well. So anyone that is there, welcome. We are, open for questions as well. Today we're going to discuss a very, very interesting topic, and we are very happy to have Mark Kepeneghian. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, but otherwise, please correct me, the CEO of Lise, and we're going to talk about a very, very interesting topic, which is in a way a priority right now in the European Union when it comes to finance, savings and investment union, tokenization, everything Mark is an expert of. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Marina. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
We really want to maybe learn more about you, learn about what's your story. We go straight to the facts, like how did you join crypto? What is your interest? Who are you? What can you tell to our audience?
It's a pleasure. So I'm the CEO of Lise, and I'm also the CEO of Krypton, which is a fintech in French and the tokenization space since 2017. So pretty early in this space, kind of the only tokenization platform back in those days. I am also the vice president of ADAN, which is the French Web3 Association, and I lead the tokenization committee on ADAN. I'm also the board member of France FinTech, which is the association regrouping all French fintech, more than 400 fintech company, uh, close to 100,000 job on those company. And I'm taking care of all public affair matter for those fintech as a board member. So the goal of Lise is to reinvent market infrastructure in Europe. Previously, market infrastructure have the legacy of decade, and I think we could have more efficient way of handling them, and the pilot regime, but also Lise is a use case of how we can bring efficiency to market infrastructure. But in Lise, we are talking about um, financial instrument listed. So it's not about digital asset, it's really equity listed, then in a future listed bonds, listed ETF, and then maybe listed derivative, but we could speak of that. So I'm working on it since 2017. I have the chance to be at the beginning of the pilot regime because of but it was an idea from the French market authority at the beginning, back in 2018-19. Then French ministry and market authority and some actor like us kind of help to find a way of having at that time we called that security token, but a way of tokenization of financial instrument. Then the field was given to DG FISMA, and after years we arrive at a DLT pilot regime that we got today since 2022-2023. And Lise ask DLT TSS license in France to act as a CSD and the MTF for listed equity.
That's very exciting. We do hear a lot of stories about, the French initiating certain regulations. We do know that there's already been a lot of done even before MiCA within the, French ecosystem when it comes to crypto assets. We now hear the DLT pilot regime. Many times, when we're discussing about French and the French government, there's a lot of ideas, a lot of things that are already done there, and then ideally, as it happened with MiCA or with the DLT pilot regime, also transposed in a way all around Europe, and this in a way becoming a regulation or directive. We will talk a lot about France also later. Right now, you mentioned a few things, the DLT pilot regime. For anyone that is not in a way familiar with this, it's really a framework that the European Union has finalized very quickly. Basically, the whole negotiations and everything started at the same time, almost as MiCA. We have MiCA only this year being applicable, but the DLT pilot regime went really quickly through the whole negotiation process, and it exists already for a few years. We do know that there are a few projects that were attempting of, in a way, going through the DLT pilot regime. We know that there were some problems with this, and what is happening at the moment is the thing that the European Commission is rethinking what went wrong. Is there something that we can change? What was the good thing? The ideas are definitely good, but like in which direction should we go? The DLT pilot regime is called in this way because it really works on, in a way, using blockchain when it comes to financial instruments. So it's very different from what we've been discussing in the last years on crypto assets. It's really focusing on financial instruments. And it was a pilot regime. So it was really aimed at testing, seeing what's happening, and then seeing, okay, what should we do long term? It's also limited time wise. So this is really a moment for everyone to reflect and to see what to do in the future. And that's where the Savings and Investments Union comes in. And this is where I wanted to, ask you, because you have so much experience. What happened in the past? How were certain rules, in a way, finalized? What can we expect in the future? But what was your experience, for example, in the past within the DLT pilot regime as well, as a company and someone that was helping also writing these laws?
Totally. So there were a digital package with Dora, Mika, and the third one, the less known, because Mika and Dora is very famous, is the DLT pilot regime. And yeah, it was a lot less discussed because we are speaking about market infrastructure. And the pilot regime is rule on MIF2. So MIF2 is obviously very known, but also on CSDR, which is the regulation for CSD, and that's something a lot less discussed. So that's why it was quicker, because there is a lot less actor in this space. In Mika, we have 100, maybe close to 1,000 of potential actor in Europe, in each country. About the DLT period regime, it's a few, and you can count them in your hand. So yeah, it was a different process, but at the end, the pilot regime is very powerful. It's not because it's not known that it's not powerful. It's the first time ever in the world that, thanks to regulation, you can be what I call a unified market infrastructure. So it's an infrastructure being the stock exchange. So as an MTF, so stock exchange, you all know the role of stock exchange, handling book order and the transaction. But thanks to the DLTTSS license, you could at the same time be the CSD. So be kind of the notary of listed financial instrument. So normally you can't be both on the same company at the same time. And having the ability of being both mean you can have a post market which is nothing to compare with all what we got today. So just give a few example. You all maybe know that in Europe we have T plus two. That means that when you're buying a financial instrument on a European stock market, the delivery versus payment take 2 days. You have a few intermediaries in this 2 day process with a clearing house. A clearing house making sure there is no counterparty risk, but also you are using the SWIFT network. You are using Target 2 and Target 2 securities, which are the ECB platform for handling those DVP. So yeah, buying a share in the traditional stock market, a digital share, because share is digitalized since decade in Europe, take 2 days, take a lot of intermediaries, and that's something that I found not very logical in 2025. You can buy a physical good online and be delivered in 1 day, but a digital share, it take 2 days and it take 5 or 6 intermediary. And that's because market infrastructure work, market infrastructure are systemic, market infrastructure are very complicated, and we kind of it's not that easy to change that, because MIF2 is about the stock exchange. There is a rule about auto regulation about the clearinghouse, and there is CSDR about the CSD. So you can't really change all in it in one regulation because it's not the same regulation handling all of those actors. So it will be too massive to say, okay, let's reinvent the way of handling a stock market in a country in Europe. So the pilot regime was kind of the answer. It was like, okay, we think that maybe we can have a more efficient market infrastructure, more efficient post-market in Europe. It is not possible to test something that innovative uh, with modifying directly the level 1 of MIF2, the level 1 of CSR. So let's do in parallel what we call the DLT pilot regime, and giving the ability to the new licensed market infrastructure under this pilot regime to act differently and as a unified market infrastructure. So as a DLT TSS, you can be the stock market, but you can have the post market that I just schematized internally, instantly, without counterpart risk. So bringing 5 intermediaries to only one, and bringing a lot of value to all of the market player, because less cost, less need of middle office, back office, and something, yeah, more efficient, and I think more logical in the digital world. But it's very powerful, and one of the problematic, and let's speak about that, of the pilot regime is, as you said, is a pilot in the name. But a DLT TSS license is not a cheap license. Being a DLT TSS is as hard as becoming a CSD and an EMTF in the same time. And becoming a CSD is not something easy. Maybe your audience know more caps under MiCA. It's nothing to compare. Unfortunately, it's like times and time harder, because CSD something very systemic in Europe, because CSD is, as I mentioned, like in a metaphor way, is the notary of financial instrument, is the company handling the share registry of a listed company. So when you are buying stock on the stock market, at the end, the fact that you are really the shareholder is by the CSD, and in the traditional way also custodian, but they are connected to the CSD. So yeah, it's very important to take. So that was something interesting, because you have a pilot regime very powerful, but it's a pilot. So at the beginning, it normally would have been live for 6 years, so 3 years, then 3 years, and you mentioned it, but because nobody want to become a CSD for 6 years, because it takes 3 years to become a CSD, so kind of not something you want to do. The European Commission said last year that it will not end in 6 years at all. So the pilot regime is don't have a limit date today. So that's something good, and we are very happy about it. But what the pilot regime have, it got a maximum threshold. So you are asking a license as hard as a traditional CSD and as hard as a traditional MTF, but you can't list all financial instruments you want. You are limited, and those limitations can bring the profitability of some project back to zero, because when you are, and that's not our case, but when you are doing a unified market infrastructure on bonds, you need massive bonds issuer insurance to be profitable. But because of the pilot regime, you are not able to do those massive, because you have very limited threshold of the amount, maximum of issuance you can do on each bonds, but also the maximum amount you can have listed at one moment of your market infrastructure. And those thresholds make the profitability of those market infrastructure kind of impossible for those kind of use case. So yeah, then we have something very innovative, that very powerful, and I think that very good initiative for from European Commission. But in the other side, it's not totally possible. Is it possible? But it's not totally easy to get in, and yeah. So when you want innovation, I think the less barrier we have at the beginning, the better we get. But yeah, so yeah.
No, that's very useful. And I've been discussing a lot with different people that come from different backgrounds, and they're always the question, what does blockchain bring to this specific business model? What does it bring to the world in general? Like, what is the use case of blockchain? And I think that in this, as you described the DLT pilot regime, this is a brilliant use case when you're saying, there's so many intermediaries, and now we can really in practice see that those intermediaries can be just, not involved in the processes in the same way as they were in the past, because we're using a new technology. And now, implementing that, thinking about all the stakeholders, thinking about everyone that is involved, how their like whole processes will change while maintaining the same, in a way, trust structure, but at the same like understanding. That was in a way an attempt on the DLT pilot regime. And you described it perfectly, because there were some in a way comments on the timing, comments on the thresholds, comments on what are the even assets that you can use within the DLT pilot regime. And there were basically maybe something that the industry would want to improve on and change. But the main idea, as you described, is really revolutionary. And it's also revolutionizing the European Union market, in the sense of bringing something new to the financial market, which we have not seen before. I would say, and I would argue that maybe blockchain, maybe with Mika, but also with the DLT pilot regime even more, is helping unionizing somehow Europe, is helping uniting Europe when it comes to this financial market. We might not have a very, I would say, aligned financial market right now in the union. It's really something that is specific to a specific member state. But what do you think about that? Like, would that be a step into the direction where even within the DLT pilot regime, or if it would become a law or something more tangible, would that be helpful as well when it comes to the development of the European financial market in general?
Yeah, I totally agree. Before SIU, we had a CMU for a few years. That was not the success that we wanted with CMU. So CMU was all about making a unified capital market in the European Union. But yeah, we have fragmented capital market, and I think the pilot regime is not the answer, but it can bring the answer to this way of having a more efficient and more connected capital market across a European country, because um, capital markets are fragmented for a lot of reasons. First of all, MIF2 is a directive, it's not a regulation, so it's transposable. So the rule is not exactly the same for all country. But moreover, that's something that the pilot regime does not solve, is the security laws in each European country is not the same, and it can be very different. So it's not easy to have a capital market union, a less fragmented financial market, when the rule is not the same for every country. But the pilot regime, with having a more efficient way of handling market infrastructure, make it at the end easier. And when you have a more less intermediated, easier market infrastructure, at the end the rules will tend to be the same, because it's when you have something easier to understand, you have something easier to regulate. And I think it can bring the capacity of European Union to have something more integrated. It will take time, I think decade, and we will see if it's the solution, but I think it's they have to try, and the pilot regime bringing innovation to a capital market can be the solution, I really think. Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing right now with Mika, that was a regulation, how much, in a way, innovation is bringing, and also just one entry point to the whole EU. And that is pretty, I would say it's nice to have an opportunity to really do offer your services in the whole European Union. We have mentioned this topic that is, in a way, mentioning the legal fragmentation as if this is a barrier, or if it's something that we could overcome going forward, thinking about this time, as you mentioned, the Savings and Investments Union, because the European Commission has issued also a call to action. So basically, they were asking the industry, what do you think about specific topics that were regulated within the DLT pilot regime? Should there be changes? what is the situation in each member state? Have they thought about tokenization? Have they linked into I don't know, potential tokenization, but also changes of their national laws? As you mentioned, there's not only financial laws, we also have just regular civil law, the basics of how we regulate assets that we know and that we own. And there's also a question about digitalization in general. So before we talk about tokenization, we really need to solve digitalization as well. And you know that you have done certain efforts in France, certain efforts have been done in Germany. But in theory, if we really want a union that would be united and unified all over Europe, so first in member states, and then we can also look into the EU regulation. So I'm also curious to learn more about France. If you can tell us more about, you know, what have you done? Have you discovered or had to change any local laws when it comes to tokenization, and also in a way the leading role of France when it comes to crypto assets finance as well, but in this case also tokenization.
Sure. So the first French law about blockchain was what we call in French ordonnance blockchain, making able to handle the share registry of unlisted share with a DLT. Before that, you have to use a paper book to end the share registry of a French company. Thanks to the Ordnance blockchain, we have a few company, a few startup handling share registry online, and so they're using a DLT, they're using a blockchain. So it was the first. Then in 2018-19, we had what we call the decision of Loi Pacte. Loi Pacte was the kickoff of the crypto asset legislation in France, creating a new chapter in the financial market law in France about digital asset and registration for what we could have this month PSAN, but it's VISP, CASP, to make able to have a crypto asset platform, creating three kind of way of regulate them. So registration, a more easy way of becoming a VSP, but it was you have to be at least registered, and you had to apply all LCBFT rule. The second one is an agreement, a license. Not a lot of actor asked it, but it was an option to do so. And the license of PSAN in France is very, very, very close to CASP license under MiCA. So I think that was kind of the base of the first discussion on MiCA, the French law about the license of PSAN. And the third one was an optional visa to white paper for ICO that was not really used. So that was about the CASP and crypto asset legislation in France. Then, as I mentioned, there was this idea, the first idea of this pilot regime. Of course, it was not named like that at the beginning, but at the same time, it was thinking of how we can handle security token. Then, when the pilot regime was voted, French legislator had to modify the French law, but also the way of IMF, what you call RGMF, the way of IMF handling those kind of actor, because the French security laws needed adaptation for DLTTSS. So Lise has at that time and still today the only one wanted this license in France, asked a few modification that was done very quick, fast, and very pragmatic by French. So I'm still thanking them to adapt the very specific security laws in France to those new kind of financial instrument. I don't know if maybe a bit too detailed, but in French we have three kind of way of having securities. So we have nominative, administrated, nominative, and what we call porter, which is bearer. And we normally, when you are in bearer form, so the investor have a custodian, which is their bank, and on the CSD know that the custodian owns share for their customer, for their client, but the CSD don't have the view of all the shareholder of the issuer that are handling the share registry. So that's bearer. But with the French modification and with the DLT TSS license, you can have what we call identified bearer. So the responsibility of the custodian change in a way, and the CSD take a lot more responsibility for the end user, and the CSD know at each time which are the final shareholder, which is not what bearer form could have done before. So that's one of the modification. Was a few, but it's kind of changing the responsibility between the CSD and the custodian. So kind of massive, because there is very rare modification of security laws in country, because it's sometimes have more than 100-year old. But yeah, so we needed to do it to be able to have a project in France. Yeah.
That's a very good example because you mentioned security laws, but thinking about even civil laws, we have these structures that have been with us for thousands of years, and now because of the new technology, we should rethink what digitalization brings to our markets and to businesses as well. But even tokenization, how to basically understand, not even in the, of course, financial industry, but also with NFTs, with other assets, how to understand ownership, how to understand possession. What does it mean for something to be digital? And especially if there's like another, let's say, non-digital asset connected to that, what are the questions around that and how to solve them? And it is in a way again a challenge because it's very specific to each member state. I think that I mean, in another very interesting topic for sure, and I know that you thought about a lot about it, and it was a question in the Savings and Investments Union consultation as well. What is the difference when it comes to public and private blockchains? Why should we take this into consideration, or shouldn't we take this into consideration? How should it be regulated from a perspective of a let's say regulator, the European Commission, and in which way? So we talk a lot about technology neutrality. Is it even possible with blockchain? Of course, like with EUCI, we do argue, and we're a huge advocate for public blockchains, especially and also when they're used in digital finance. As many of our listeners know, there was a very interesting report also published by the European Commission, commissioned and written by Fabian Schar on the basically potential of public blockchain when it's used in financial industry. But I would really like to hear your take as well, because you've been in this space for such a long time and you know everything, the developments and the new things that might be changing as well.
Yeah, it's a topic of that more than since 10 years we are speaking of this kind of battle between permissionless and permission blockchain. For me, it's very important to have to be technological neutral. So for me, it's market infrastructure. We need to have the choice to use permissionless or permission DLT, and for me, the regulation have nothing to do with that. But regulation specify rules which are not directly linked to the DLT, but the way of handling the DLT, so permission and or permission, make those rules apply in a different matter. But for me, you have just to prove to the regulator that you are applying the rules, and you will apply them a bit differently. Okay, if you use a permission, but at the end, the only fact is you need to apply the rule. So it's very important to be technology neutral. And yeah, as a TLT TSS, you need to apply a lot of rule. So in if you are using a permissionless blockchain, I think you will have to use permissioned smart contract. So you are putting the permission from the blockchain to the smart contract, and it can be a very good use case, to do a lot of things. But at the end, yeah, you will have to apply rule. You have to have the control on who can buy those security, who can own those, and who can trade those. Um, but you can do it on the smart contract, but you can also do it with a permissioned DLT. For us, for Lise, we are using a permissioned blockchain because our goal is to be the more transparent possible for final investor. So in our use case, we will connect to all banks custodian, and for end user, it will invest in listed share listed on Lise market, as it will do on other traditional European stock market. So very transparent. Let's say you are having a trading account in a European broker. You want to buy share. You want to buy, I don't know, BNP share. So you don't need to be on Euronext. You don't need to know who is Euroclear. You don't need to have all this process in head. You just go on your trading account. You say you are doing a buy order, so you say how many share you want to buy at what price. Then the broker will send the order and do the post market thing. So it's very transparent for you. You are kind of buying from there, and that's our goal. At least we want you to have the same way of buying share, and the connection from the custodian to Lise will be a lot different than the traditional way. But for the end investor, we really want to have the same and the most easy way of handling. And that's why we use permission blockchain, because we don't want end investor to interact with the blockchain, because blockchain can bring a lot of value we see in crypto, but I think today it can't be you can't target like all European investor, because some really don't want to handle private key, to handle those complexities. So yeah, for me that was the answer. But I get that other project can have a different view, and that's very welcoming, because we have under a pilot and nobody have the answer. So let's try and let's see what's the best solution. But yeah, our goal is to make a very easy market infrastructure for end user, and for custodian, the connection will be a lot more different. So kind of at the beginning difficult to connect to us, but at the end, thanks to the integrated market infrastructure, thanks to the instant DVP, it will bring a lot of value to custodian, because you don't really need middle office and back office anymore with instant DVP. So yeah, it bring the cost a lot less, and also for issuer, reducing the cost of doing an IPO, reducing the cost of issuing bonds, reducing the cost of issuing an ETF. And thanks to that, really think it can bring the public market closer to private equity, because private equity is booming in Europe since a few years, because it's kind of easier, and private and public market afraid a lot of company, because it's costly, because it's complicated. And thanks to this new kind of market infrastructure, we can really bring the complexity down, and by doing so, we can speak to, let's say, an SME raising 5, 4, 6 million euro, and today it will not go to a public market. It will not do an IPO for this amount in Europe. But we really think that thanks to the pilot regime, this is new way of handling IPO. It can be more efficient, easier than in private equity, while bringing liquidity thanks to the secondary market to investor, while bringing a easier governance, because on private equity we'll have one fund of a few fund which will be at your board. With public market will have maybe 100 or 1,000 shareholder, which every shareholder having a small part of your company, and nobody at your board. So yeah, it's very different, but we really think if the you bring the complexity down, you bring the cost down. I really think it's a better way of financing yourself.
There's a lot of interesting cases and very interesting arguments, but I feel like many times when we talk to regulators, for example, they always, of course, have to address risks very, I would say, objectively, and thinking about like what are the risks, especially when it comes to the new technology, the risks that are linked to the tech specifically, that to the one that we're describing. And we know that there's been attempts and some opinions, specifically again coming from France, from the IMF, ICPR, about the how to make sure that the tech is safe, that we know that is something that we can rely upon. There's been papers written on DeFi that went into very technical descriptions. There's been something written also around smart contracts. I don't know what's your opinion there, and especially when you were thinking about this combination of private public blockchain, private smart contracts. I hear a lot from the industry also saying we cannot just say this is public, this is private. When it comes to an application, when it comes to a company, there's such a mix of technologies that we're using, that it's really hard to just say black and white. It's at the end of the day, it's a whole application that has to be safe.
Yeah, that's true, but it's not the same thing for DeFi that for pilot regime, because
Yes.
on DeFi, you don't really rely on an actor very regulated. So regulator have to make sure the tech it's something that is very trustable, because it's kind of the whole thing. Like it's the earth of the DeFi project, the tech. And if there is a bug on the smart contract, a bug on the public blockchain, it will make the investor lose. On the second part, on DLT Pilot Regime, you have a CSD, which will be the entity responsible. So even if the tech fail, it will be responsible. So it will have with its own fund to make sure that investors are finding back their money, finding back their share. So you can have more, you can be more easy of technological choice when there is a responsibility for an actor, which is not the case on DeFi. So tech is the whole system. So that's the differences. But on the financial market regulation, uh, financial market can use the technology they want. So Euroclear is a European CSD, and they are using DLT for premium market, and they have the right to do so. And that's something that is very good. They are doing so. So I don't think there is a problematic with that today. Um, so yeah, it will depend. For me, if there is a regulated entity that, if there is a fail, it can be looked for, uh, neutral technology is king. If there is not, I think the answer is more complicated, and you have to protect the end investor. uh, you have to make sure that it's reliable. After, how you make sure that, it's not that easy. And I think that you have to find solution pragmatic, because innovation is very important. So yeah, you have to accompany that movement. But yeah, it's not the same subject for me.
And the question, very concrete to your company and to what you're doing, like how it is interacting with Lise, like how it actually works in practice, about your company and maybe the services and the companies that you're working with.
So we're still waiting the DLTTSS license. We hope we can have this license in a few weeks. Then SME, European SME will be able to do IPO on Lise. So they can look for capital from 1 to 12 million euro post listing act. So on Lise, it will be a digitalized IPO process that will take a few weeks to do the IPO. And investor can have a trading account on Lise platform, because on the DLT pilot regime, you have exemption on MIF2 and CSDR, and you have the exemption that normally an MTF have to be intermediated. But thanks to the pilot regime, you can accept direct investor to your market infrastructure. So at the beginning, you will have to create an account on Lise, but that's not our goal. We want to be intermediated by banks because banks have all the your brand customer. They are big distributor, very powerful, and we don't think it is possible for a lease or a kind of those kind of market to have hundred of million of investors directly to the investors. Too costly, too complicated. So our goal is to be connected to the few French banks, but also to the European banks to make sure that listed stock on lease are available in all trading accounts for all European citizens. And that will take time because, as I said, we are not using the fixed protocol. We are kind of using different way of connecting ourselves. But then when the connection will be done, we will be totally transparent. So we'll have a new market with new kind of issuer, less costly for everybody. But for the end investor, it will only be new kind of asset available to their trading account, and that's the goal. And for the end user, the real goal is when you participate to an IPO of a European SME, you are directly investing into what we call in France, I don't know if it's European world, real economy. Because when an SME do an IPO, they are raising capital to employ, to create an industry, to develop themselves. So in something that's are that I wanted are wanted for investor, and I really think that lease can be kind of one of the solution to yeah, bring back the ability to redirect whole savings to what we want, and what we want can be SME, it can be other thing, and that's we'll have a lot of other choice platform. But if you want to invest in SME, today is very complicated and is too difficult and is not listed. You cannot sell again, so it's not really doable. And SME are the majority of European company. So today I find it, yeah, kind of not a good thing that the SME are the earth of Europe, but you cannot invest on them, you cannot support them, even if you want to. So having a yeah, stock market for SME, I think is a solution. Is not it will not be a solution for all, but is a kind of a solution for those investor, retail or institutional, want to, yeah, redirect a few part of their investment into what, yeah, real economy, smaller company, but having access to liquidity also. Because if you invest in the SME and are blocked for 10 years, it's not something you are willing to do. But if you invest in SME and have access to secondary market, yeah, the decision is easier to take. And by taking an easier decision, we will, yeah, engage a movement to relegate part of the saving that are sleeping on all saving account of European citizen into SME, and I think it will power up the economy. So it's a bit macro, a bit massive for a small company as Lise. So don't have the pretension of doing that movement, but I think it could be the first step of this movement.
Being a pioneer is not always easy, but it's definitely, showing the way for all the others. And it's very aligned also with the Savings and Investments Union discussions we're having in the Commission for sure. And I really like that you mentioned liquidity. Many times we're used to, let's say, crypto assets, and there's like quite a lot of liquidity. We are, in a way, looking into stablecoins right now and which ones are liquid and how much liquidity there is, especially when it comes to the euro-backed stablecoins. But when it comes to tokenized financial assets, it's even more important. How do you look into the liquidity question? I mean, you're basically in a way solving it, but I don't think that we are maybe as aware as we should be about this issue, the liquidity issue.
I totally agree. It's a very big issue, and it's not easy to solve liquidity. Even if you have a stock market, it's not because you have the stock market that you have liquidity. So, to build liquidity, we have to make sure that the SME is transparent. We have to make sure that some analysts will do the job to reevaluate the SME biannually to make sure that investors know what will be the theoretical price of the share they got. We have to bring back some market maker to the order book to make sure the spread is reduced. Yeah, there is a lot of things, and it will be kind of work after we get the license, and very hard work to bring liquidity for SME, but very important work. And yeah, it will be our focus. And to be honest, the kind of success key for Lise is two things. The first thing is to connect to every banks. So that's what very important step. By connecting to every bank, we will be available for everybody. So very important thing. But the second thing is not because you are available to everybody that you have liquidity. So make sure to create liquidity to reduce the spread, and that's something there is no direct action. Connecting to all banks. So you ask them, okay, let's do the connection. It will take time, etc. For liquidity, there is no easy answer, and nobody know how you can for sure bring liquidity for an issuer. So yeah, we want to make sure to have liquidity, and I always say that the first step for having liquidity is having a known issuer. Because let's say you are Tesla. If Tesla is listed on an unknown stock market, it will have liquidity. So you see, at each the stock market can do a lot, but at the final time, the issuer is king. So you have to have something that people want to invest in, and that's something that is not totally under our power, but we want to make sure during our IPO process to have what we call famous issuer. But the second step, and that we have the end in the second step, that is very important. It's kind of missing today on the small and mid caps listed company is periodic valuation. So since MIF, we kind of lose of small analysts because yeah, the business model was bring back, and yeah, we want to take smaller to take analysts and to make sure they will follow every company listed on this, and that's very important. So by having periodical analysis on each listed SME, you will make sure that the information will be and will circulate on all investor. And by doing so, I think we can really bring the more important part to have liquidity back. It will not be enough, but yeah, that's the for me the big step.
So first, congratulations on the future license. We hope you get it, as soon as possible, and you can start with all the work that you're planning to do for a really long time. The last question of this interview, which is brilliant. I'm really happy again to have you here. What is the ideal scenario for you? Of course, you're planning everything around Lise and the company, but also let's say we're talking about a savings and investments union when it comes to France specifically, but also Europe. If everything would be, going towards the direction that you would foreseen, and there would be interest from different institutions, and the whole political process will be finalized, how would a savings and investment union look, let's say, in 5 years?
Um, we love to have threshold desperation of threshold, so don't have a maximum amount of IPO we can do, of listed financial instrument we can have on our DLTTSS. So that's very important. But also on the DLT Pilot Regime, you can't do all kind of financial instrument. You can do derivative, and I think that having a unified market infrastructure bring a lot of value for derivative, because margin call are easier, and those kind of margin call and other corporate action for derivative cost a lot for banks. And by bringing the efficiency up, you are kind of creating a lot of value. So yeah, our goal is to make sure we can be global, we can be on all financial instruments, and we don't have any more threshold. Uh, yeah, and like my vision is like financial markets. I've always be a tool for banks. So we want to be a tool for banks. We have to be used by banks to succeed, and we we already welcome a few European banks at our cap table, and we'll continue to open up to all European banks to make sure we will be global, and every bank will use it to make sure that we will become global. That's our goal.
That's a great vision, and the vision of founders and European founders, especially when it comes to helping SMEs, is something we should all take into consideration, especially regulators. So I do thank you again for taking this time on a end of the week, on a Friday. But I'm really happy, and I'm sure that the listeners will appreciate. And good luck with everything. We'll definitely stay in touch and follow what's happening with Lise.
Thank you so much, Marina. I was very pleased to be here. So thank you again, and it's a pleasure to have a second discussion whenever you want.
Thank you.